Chapter 1, the four grounds or principles of that true fight at all manner of weapons are these four. 1. Judgment. 2. Distance. 3. Time. 4. Place. The reason whereof these four grounds or principles be the first and chiefest are the following. Because knowing judgment, you keep your distance. Through distance, you take your time. Through time, you safely win or gain the place of your adversary. The place being won or gained, you have time safely either to strike, thrust, ward, close, grip, slip, or go back, in the which time your enemy is disappointed to hurt you or to defend himself by reason that he hath lost his true place. The reason that he hath lost his true place is by the length of time through the number of his feet to which he is of necessity driven to that will be agent. The four governors are those that follow. 1. The first governor is judgment, which is to know when your adversary can reach you and when not, and when you can do the like to him, and to know by the goodness or badness of his lying what he can do, and when and how he can perform it. The second governor is measure. Measure is the better to know how to make your space true to defend yourself or to offend your enemy. 3 and 4. The third and fourth governors is a twofold mind, when you press in on your enemy, for as you have a mind to go forward, so you must have at that instant a mind to fly backwards upon any action that shall be offered or done by your adversary. Here endeth the reading. Greetings, fencers of the interwebs. My name is William Kilmer. I fence at Worcester Historical Swordsmanship in Worcester, Massachusetts. I have been studying George Silver's works for 3 years. Do you have a moment to talk about the true fight of George Silver? The section that we are looking at today, as I promised, is the principles or governors and the principles or grounds there, and the governors. The words are too similar. I'm going to try to remember to say principles rather than grounds, just to keep them separated for us, but I'll probably break down at some point. So, the principles or grounds are the fundamentals. The governors are the quick reference that you make during the course of the fight. And these terms occur in paradoxes of defense, but they are not defined. Paradoxes of defense is, as you may have noticed, a bit scattershot. I mean, there are some sections that are really tightly written and very clever, even humorous. And there are other sections where... So, I suspect that what happened is that when Mr. Silver published his Paradoxes of Defense, some of his friends read it, like you do with your friends' books, and maybe they came to him and said, you know, George, you reference the grounds of true fight, and you reference the governors of true fight, but you never define them, and probably a lot of people know what you mean, but it's also very likely that there are some people, perhaps who trained differently than you did, who don't really know to what you are referring, or how to understand these terms. And so when Mr. Silver started out to write his second book, right up at the top of the first chapter, after the introductory material, here we have the grounds, the principles, followed by the governors. And this is, I think, intended to inform our understanding of both books. I recommend to you Stephen Hand's recent paper Will the real George Silver please stand up? I will link that below in the description. I had the privilege of reading a late draft of the paper and commenting upon it before its publication. And Stephen makes a very good point, and he makes it very well, that in any questionable passage, in any place where one is uncertain, because we have the grounds, because we have the governors, we have a method of testing our interpretation by referring back to these fundamentals of the system. And I think this is exactly what George Silver intended that we should do. Having said that, there are many who feel that this section is darn near perfect. I am not among them. And I think that the explanation of the grounds is a bit disappointing. I don't think it's quite finished. I don't think it quite accomplishes what Silver intends it to do. And so let's, for a moment, just quickly look at that again and see if you can follow what I mean. The reason whereof these four grounds or principles be the first and chiefest are the following: because knowing judgment you keep your distance, through distance you take your time, through time you safely win or gain the place of your adversary, the place being won or gained you have time safely either to strike, thrust, ward, close, grip, slip, or go back, in which time your enemy is disappointed to hurt you or to defend himself by reason that he hath lost his true place. The reason he has lost his true place is by the length of time through the number of his feet to which he is of necessity driven to that will be agent. You see what I've got there. The rhythm of the sentence builds. It's like we're coming to a climax, and then there's that sort of stepping off the curb moment with to that will be agent. Yes, it is a paragraph. It is also a sentence. William Faulkner, meet George Silver. We don't quite get the punch, the epiphany at the end of this that I think Silver intended to put there. But we're dealing with an unfinished work. And this is something that we have to bear in mind. I am aware of people who have looked at the original manuscript. It's really clearly, apparently, if you look at it, unfinished. The very end part is skeletal. It looks like an outline or notes. And there are other places earlier in the manuscript where clearly Mr. Silver has started to revise. Things are crossed out. There's interlinear corrections. It's never completed. Like Clausewitz's Art of War, we're looking at an interrupted process. In Art of War, which you may have read, I'm sure you remember, there are sections that are heavily revised and probably as they would have been published had Clausewitz ever been able to publish the book. And there are other sections, and it's not necessarily chronological, but there are other sections where things are not quite as finished. But despite not ending with the punch that I think Silver intended, there is a lot of value here. And I think put together with the governors, this clarifies a great many things. The purpose of the grounds and governors are to ground brief instructions. Everything that follows is to be read in the light of the predicate. This is where you go to resolve any question you have about how to understand any passage. And because the two terms, grounds and governors, appear prominently in paradoxes of defense in several places, I think we are intended to and may read paradoxes of defense in light of these definitions. Now, in brief instructions, the grounds are never mentioned again as a group. The terms judgment, distance, time, and place recur repeatedly, but he references the governors many times in multiple places in Paradoxes of Defense. And if you go back to Paradoxes and look at it, you will see that when he talks about the grounds there are more than these four. So he's obviously taken some thought since he finished Paradoxes. He's whittled down the list. He's trying to be more systematic in his presentation. He pares these fundamental principles down to these four key ones that he wants to be the basis of our understanding. So let's just look and do a little compare and contrast with the grounds and the governors to see what we may learn. The first ground and the first governor are both judgment. And Silver gives us a working definition of judgment to go on with. And what he says in the first governor is judgment, which is to know when your adversary can reach you, and when not, and when you can do the like to him, and to know by the goodness or badness of his lying what he can do, and when and how he can perform it. So, I think he intends us to understand that to be the meaning of judgment as we are to apply it basically any place the term occurs, including in the grounds. The second ground is distance. The second governor is measure. Now, here we have a temptation to read these as being the same, but they're not. They are related concepts, but not the same. And having seen me attempt to talk about this, I'm going to make this really brief because Michael tells me that what we really need is a separate video with pictures and diagrams to make this clearer than I can explain it. So I'm just going to very quickly read to you the definitions of these two terms out of the glossary of Paul Wagner's book. There. So Wagner says about distance, the separation between you and your opponent, see close distance, wide distance, out of distance. And what he has to say about measure is, he has two definitions: your and your opponent's reach, taking into account your distance, your pace, the length of your weapons, the lean of your body, and so forth. And the second definition, from the current lying, a judgment of what targets can be reached by your and your opponent's weapons in due time. So, measure refers to the attributes of the individual combatant, particular to that weapon, particular to that set of circumstances. Distance refers to the state of the combat. And with that, we will move on and come back to look at this again. The third ground is time. And this is one that's a bit controversial, but I think we really have to think about how Silver understood time in his context. Silver is an Elizabethan. He is living and writing at about the year 1600, perhaps a little later, because it appears that Elizabeth has died and that James has assumed the throne from some of the comments in the prefatory materials. But in any case, he's about 60 years ahead of the birth of Isaac Newton. Aristotle is the mental furniture of every educated person, not just in England, but throughout Europe. And it is not just every educated person. It is the mental furniture of basically everybody who writes upon sword combat or combat arts in general, understands time in an Aristotelian way. And I think, once again, Stephen Hand's paper, Will the Real George Silver Please Stand Up, linked below, gives you a really good exposition of what Silver's predecessors and his contemporaries were talking about when they talk about time. Silver did not invent a way of talking about time. He uses the understanding that everybody around him would have shared. Aristotle basically tells us motion defines time. The circuit of the sun, the stars revolving around Polaris in the sky, the pendulum of the clock, all measure time by their motion. Okay, so their motion, their action, by those the combatants also define the time of the fencing phrase. And action is a packet of time, which is called by Silver a time, but modern fencers tend to use the Italian word, which is tempo. This can be confusing because Silver does use time in two senses. The first sense is that of an occasion. Something has happened at this time. And the second sense is the one to which I just referred, that packet of time which is defined by a particular motion, which is a tempo. And in the grounds, I think he probably means tempo when he speaks of time, but he may also be talking about occasion. He may very well intend us to hear both when he says it, because he's a Elizabethan. He plays with words like a 2-year-old plays with what's on their plate. It's the way the Elizabethans used language. That's just the way it is, and we have to live with it. But I'm certain that he does intend one, at least, of our understandings of time to be that tempo, that packet of time required to complete a particular action. Now, this is important because when you understand time this way, that means that you can insert a shorter tempo into a longer one. It also means that you can break a tempo, like you can stop a clock. And you can initiate a tempo prior to the completion of another tempo. The packets can overlap, and this is the basis of Silver's plays. This informs us about his true times and his false times. It informs us about his 4 actions: first, before, warden, strike, and after. These are discussed, of course, in episode 1, but the before is very simply when the patient inserts a smaller packet of time, a shorter tempo, into the agent's larger tempo, which is the first. The ward and strike is where the patient agent interrupts the agent's tempo and initiates a new tempo. The clock is stopped and then restarted again. The after allows the agent's tempo to be completed, but by slipping the strike, the patient agent has initiated a new tempo prior to the agent's tempo being completed. The agent's first moving from out of measure is time, hand, body, and foot. Now, when you make a strike with the sword, you know you want the blow and the foot to land together. This is how you get the strongest, cleanest strike. You put them as close together as you can. A whisker before, a whisker after. Best is right on the strike. But there are exceptions. And the exception is deception. Very often, when you wish to deceive your opponent, oh, why ever would you want to do that? But hypothetically, if you did want to deceive your opponent, what you might do is just initiate a tempo and then break it yourself. For instance, you initiate a strike and you bring it forward, time of the hand, started with the time of the foot, but the time of the hand is slowed down so that the hand and foot would land together, and then they don't. The foot lands, the hand is still withheld, the patient throws up their ward, and now the agent has the opportunity to flow around it. They have broken their time and initiated a new tempo. I know this is controversial, but it is also fencing. Now, one of the things that we really have to look at here is the twofold mind. And this is one of the reasons that I'm very confident that Silver intends his system to be not exclusively defensive, but also offensive. Because the twofold mind may apply to the patient, but most always applies to the agent. The agent must be aware when they initiate that first tempo that the patient may attempt to insert a tempo to do a before. Even if you do everything right, even if your attack is perfect and you're completely covered coming in, there are people out there, I know this is hard to believe, but they will attack into an attack, irrespective of whether there's a target or not. And sometimes they will attack in hard and deep. And if they come deep enough, they may find something. So, the agent needs to decide, as the attack is coming in, whether the agent can safely continue. This is an instant-by-instant decision, and the key from Silver's point of view is to stay safe, to remain in control of the fight. And that may mean abort. It may mean that you fly out as you were coming in. Possibly your opponent will give you an opportunity when they are spent for an after of your own on some target. But from Silver's point of view, look to your safety first. Ward, slip, or fly out because you want to avoid the muddle. You want to avoid, once again, being in that position where judgment cannot operate, where parry and riposte are coming fast and furious, and you're too close, there's no judgment, nobody has the place, everybody may think they do, and this is the land where doubles are born. In free play, in tournaments, and from Silver's descriptions, in his day, in occasions at sharps. This is where that double hit comes from, and that double hit with sharps means that somebody, and maybe both somebodies, are likely going home on a door, and that is not optimal. So, it is better to get out and lose the attack, and then if your opponent is disordered, go back in. Take advantage of that. This, I will confess, is difficult for me. It's something I'm working on in my own fencing. I have a tendency to go in there and stay in there and try to slug it out. It's not what I want to do. I want to do what Mr. Silver tells me to do. So, once again, this is not intended to be revolutionary. This is not intended to be novel. Silver is presenting us with what he understands to be the good, old, solid English system of cut and thrust sword. And here we're going to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed it. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you know when the next one goes up. We're going to try to have a new video up every week or 10 days. Upcoming, we've got distance and measure and another video where we will look at place, and I'm not sure in what order. And as I said in episode 2, Stephen Hand has said that we may show some of the exercises from his silver curriculum, and my instructor, Ken Monshine, is toying with the idea of doing this as a class project for the Tuesday night class. So, in a few weeks, look for that. Until then, see you on the flip side. If you found this episode interesting, please be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. It makes it easier for other people who would also be interested to find us. Right, Jessica? Yes, such a good girl. She's a good girl. This is the usual disclaimer. I have said elsewhere, I am not an expert. I am a student. And I have drawn heavily on the works of others to inform my understanding. First of all, of course, upon the works of George Silver himself, but also on the works of many instructors and scholars. And if I have drawn upon your work and you feel that I have misrepresented you, slighted you, misattributed you, or in any other way offended, please accept my apologies, let me know, and let me fix it as we go forward. You have been absolutely instrumental in improving my understanding of George Silver's True Fight. Any errors or omissions are, of course, entirely my own. Thank you. See you on the flip side.